The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar today, Working Effectively with Brazil. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. We'll begin in just a moment as we wait for a few more attendees to come on. Okay, it's 10:35 Eastern Time. Again, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We're going to go ahead and get started now with the Working Effectively with Brazil presentation. You'll notice as you've come into this meeting, if you're not familiar with the platform, this is GoToWebinar. You'll have a panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and a few things are going to be available to you here. We want to encourage participation throughout the session. So there'll be a section where you can ask questions to us throughout the meeting if you have any technical questions about the webinar itself, questions regarding the content of the webinar that we'll address. And there'll also be a place where you can respond to some of the polling questions and other questions that will come up. In addition to that, we'll have a traditional poll that will come up as well. So in the polling section of the panel, you'll see in a little bit there'll be a question that will come up, and you can respond to that, and we'll let you know what the results of that poll are when they come up. Again, if you have any technical questions about the audio or the visual presentation, feel free to submit those in the questions pod, and we will respond to those. I'd like to now turn it over to Ed Hannibal from Mercer to give a brief introduction to the presentation. If you'll advance the slide, please.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Ed Hannibal. I'm the Mercer's Global Mobility Practice Leader based in Chicago. It's great to have all of you here today with us. I know many of you have dialed in today, are familiar with our webcast series, but for those of you who are new, Mercer runs a series of webcast events throughout the year to raise topics that we think are of interest to the global mobility community. Today we're focusing on Brazil. This is a location on everyone's radar, both personally, professionally, from an entertainment and sports perspective. I'm excited personally to go through the program today, and I'm happy to be joined by our colleagues from RW3, the cultural training experts. Specifically, I would like to introduce Josh Sturdivant, the Chief Technology Officer for RW3, to take us through the session. Enjoy the series today, and Josh, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Ed. We're really happy for this opportunity to share this really valuable information with you. If you go ahead and advance the slide again, I'll tell you a little more briefly about RW3. So RW3 was founded in 2001. I'll go ahead and advance the slide if you don't mind. founded in 2001, so we've been in the intercultural training business for quite a while now. Our two founders have written several books on subjects surrounding capitalizing on the global workforce and managing across cultures. We've also partnered with Mercer in creating Cultural Training Passport, which is a fully featured cultural learning facility and country information resource that expats can use to learn about the country they're moving to, both before their assignment and during the assignment. So I'd like to now open up a poll for all of you. Tell us a little bit about what brings you here today. What specifically, what challenges you've had in your business activities with Brazil. So you see the options are meetings, hierarchy, has that been one of your big challenges, communication, management, or if there's something else that you don't see here, go ahead and submit it through the questions box. What's the number one challenge? Give you all a few more seconds to vote here. Looks like you've got about 75% of you who have voted. Very interesting responses so far. Okay, let me go ahead and close the poll now. All right, so as you can see, we've had about 3% of you say that meetings are the top challenge. That's the lowest number. 5% have said hierarchy. 53% have said communication is the top challenge with your Brazilian business activities, by far the majority of you. Management is 11%, and other is 28%. And some of those others that we see here is actually someone else said communication, non-responsiveness from colleagues, client billing, compensation, not performing all tasks outlined. Again, a couple more about tax implications and compensation issues and banking issues. Managing and understanding local regulations, another issue that we'll be talking about some of those things a little bit later in the presentation for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and close that now again. Vivian, you can bring up, go to the next slide. So that's all really interesting. So you'll see that we'll cover a lot of those issues in today's presentation. Our objectives today are to provide you all with an overview of Brazilian culture, discuss some of the key Brazilian business values and behaviors that you'll encounter when working with Brazilians. And you'll learn a little bit about a model for understanding culture and finding out a little bit about yourself and your own work styles and preferences and how those compare to Brazilian cultural norms. And as a result of that understanding, you're going to learn how to more effectively interact with your Brazilian colleagues or customers and vendors as well. And in order to help you understand those things to achieve these objectives, I'd like to introduce Vivian Vinasce-Leite. If you want to forward to the next slide. Vivian is the managing director and founder of Going Places, which is headquartered in Sao Paulo. It's a firm dedicated to intercultural training and consulting. She has pioneered intercultural training and consulting in Brazil and in Latin America for over 14 years. She's trained thousands of employees from many of the Fortune 500 companies. She's also a lawyer with experience in corporate and international law, in addition to immigration and tax law. So she has familiarity with a lot of the issues you mentioned. She has lived and worked in Germany, Canada, and the U.S., and she has a really interesting background. Her family has roots in Germany. She's fluent in Portuguese, Spanish, English, and German. And I am delighted to introduce you to her today. So Vivian, shall we get started?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to run this webinar. Thank you to all those 151 present at this point. I'm just really curious to know if the last ones coming in 10 minutes late are Brazilians. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you tell me who you are and where you're from. And I'm really, really delighted to be here and to be able to share with you in that brief period of time as much as information, as much experience I can. Keep it open to your questions. At this point, I really, really want to encourage you to pose questions. There is never a bad question. There is never a wrong question. And we actually would like to leave at the end at least 10 minutes time for those questions. And that's by purpose so that we find ourselves interacting more. And stick around, please. I would like to encourage you to stick around for the questions. We've run a number of those webinars in the last times, and it's been an incredible experience to stick around for the questions. Following the presentation, briefly facts and figures about Brazil that you probably know already. Just a reminder again, it's one of the largest economies in the Americas and the largest in the South America. And let me give you already an intercultural clue here. Brazilians know that. Brazilians know that, and a lot of our actions are pretty much motivated by this. In a way, also a little bit of an attitude of, okay, maybe we are not getting our act together as perfectly as we should, but in a way or another, it's such a big, huge economy that you can't really forgo it. So if you're not in touch with us now, you will at some point. So for better or worse, we are there, and we are there to keep, even if it just slow down a little bit at this point, but there will be a comeback because it's not to be overseen. A country like that. We lived through the 2009 crisis with relatively few scars, and that has one explanation. One of the many explanations is that it was in some points quite isolated from the rest of the economy, the banking system especially. We have mega cities with all their potential and all their problems. We are hosting the 2014 World Cup very, very soon with all the beauty and all the problems, and same coming up in 2016 Summer Olympics in my city, Rio. I'm talking to you from São Paulo, but I'm originally from Rio. So let me move forward and actually connecting to the information I gave you on the prior slide. Here we have a country of continental size. In a way, I gave you clues about what kind of impact this has on the Brazilian psychology or the Brazilian mindset. It is per se so big that it does behave very much like a continent and does not see itself as a Latin American continent together with the neighbors. And this is not a sign of arrogance or anything. It's really a sign of being, most of our population is located at the coast. And so interaction with our neighbors is not as much as you would maybe think just because we're neighbors. There is really a continent between us. Many of the North American people might think of us as being very similar to all the other Latin Americans, and starting with Mexicans, which is the closest to the United States. But please keep in mind that it's like 10-hour flight to Mexico. So really, Mexico for us is also a different world as much as it is for you. And we don't speak Spanish, we speak Portuguese. So Brazilians pretty much are history for themselves. Let me move forward. So again, same idea, continent or an island? Yes, more like an island mentality, speaking about the language or thinking about the fact that economy was closed and very protectionistic for many, many, many years, and in many sectors you might know it still is. You might experience this on a daily basis. So not only a continent, also a little bit of an island mentality. Let me move forward. I usually like to throw in some relatively new news and interesting. This is of April, so it's almost 2 months old, but it's saying that the World Cup specifically has generated a reality shock. We're Brazilians, and you might also have read that in the news or heard in the news. We have been, since last year, June, we have had on and off protests on the streets, and what that really means is that the population has woken up to the frustration of not finding anything really ready to go or not ideally ready to go for the World Cup, and certainly not a legate or something that we will inherit to enjoy as citizens after the World Cup. So a big revolt, protest, mainly Pacific protests, but really protests impairing productivity because the city stops. So we are going through that, and maybe it's a growing pain. That's how I look at it. And we're going through that right now as I speak. The other big challenge, before we even talk about intercultural challenges, but they might also be absolutely related, is the index of the ease of doing business index that is published by the World Bank on a yearly basis. And it looks like it is so many more times easier to do business in the United States than it is in Brazil. And again, I think what we see is this growing pain where we can't basically keep up with the growth in income for a million of people that jumped from one income category to the other and now have cars or are traveling more, and the infrastructure is just not keeping track with that, internet, etc. So keep in mind that your colleagues in Brazil are going through that on a daily basis. Maybe just to encourage you to feel a little bit more empathic towards that. And also when you plan your coming year for meetings or something like that, you might want to understand that you need more time, and your expat who might be sent here for look-see needs more time to go through all those apartments that he's looking at. So just giving you some examples of how that impacts our work and our lives. Now at this point, actually, I'm curious, like I think every woman and every Brazilian, we're very curious. So I'm curious to know, why are you here today? Why are you joining us here today? What is your personal interest? What would you like to do better after listening to us here today? And just can you help us, Josh, to open the poll and maybe let people just throw out their ideas and why they're here today?
Sure. So folks, why don't you go ahead and in the questions pod, just submit your thoughts, one of your reasons for attending today, some of the things that are on your mind. So we have some people who, of course, have expats in Brazil. A number of people asking about compensation issues and, how do you provide increases based on merit and navigating unions and that sort of thing. New hires, how to bring in new hires and introduce them to the corporate culture. There are a number of expats actually on the call, it looks like. There are several people who just want to gain a better understanding and be more effective in working with the business and culture in Brazil. there are some people who would like to build relationships with their colleagues and understand the challenges so they can solve problems together. There is a very lax impression that our colleagues give us, that they're more lax about doing business.
Okay, good.
Okay. Support, compensation, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't want to interrupt people answering, but I think this already gave us a little bit of an idea of who's joining and why you are here today, and all of those points, and also the points you answered, very interesting, your answers on the poll, not only the ones that were geared to communication, management, etc., and hierarchy, but many of you responded independently and pointed out, I could just nod. I was sitting here and going, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and I can see your difficulties. I can understand. And I actually, one of the things that I think permeates everything that you're saying is bureaucracy. It's not on our presentation, but I think it is something that you and us here locally have to face all the time. And maybe you can take with you from this presentation, first of all, that you cannot do anything about that, about eliminating the bureaucracy. So maybe one of the objectives, other than the 3 objectives we have pointed out before, is to how to deal with this without going crazy, without going too frustrated, and knowing that you cannot really change it, but what can you change in yourself to deal better with that. So we had to pick between all those challenges, all those new things we had to learn when dealing with Brazil. We had to pick 3 points, and what we picked really is the implicit and indirect communication, which seems to has been a winner anyways in our little poll session here. Emotions, how to deal with emotions and relationships more than emotions in Brazil, and the so-called informal hierarchy, which some describe as being the most formal informal hierarchy in the world. So let's go and have a look at what we call relationship emotions section of this presentation. And you must know by now that relationship is possibly the most motivational factor in Brazil. When you talk new hires, when you talk retention, when you talk, in a way, recognition, not compensation, but recognition, enchanting is, let's say, the main priority. It's very, very, in other words, it's very important to Brazilians to be liked. In other cultures, you may find that motivational factors might be compensation, money or benefits, status, professional recognition, and all of that still is important in Brazil, but it will lose in relevance if you do not feel liked. So here I would also point out some heads up, some pointers, some look out to another challenge that just comes as a consequence. You can well imagine that you might have a potential challenge to give feedback, because if a person's main motivation is to be liked, your honest and constructive feedback might be understood as a personal critique, and really, if that's the case, you might find yourself in a situation where the person is not motivated to cooperate that much with you. So here you go. I would say that's something you need to get a little bit more prepared, or groomed, or coached, whereas I would highly recommend you also do the same thing on the other side, because getting feedback is actually a gift. Being able to receive feedback has to be learned in this country. Now, this is also very much linked to communication in a way or another. And years ago, at one of my NLP courses, I was taught that the golden rule of communication, which is actually stated here, the meaning of your message is usually in the response, is contained in the response you get. In other words, if you get the response, the reaction, the answer, the result that you actually were aiming for through the communication you send out, verbally, non-verbally, etc., you have been a successful communicator. So it sounds very logic. I like that. I didn't like the fact that now the responsibility was on my side, but that's how that's how the golden rule is taught apparently all over the world. Now Brazilians tend to turn that around, because we have a saying that we use quite often, and sayings are very meaningful in cultures. If you look at sayings, they will reveal basically the mindset of those people, and the more often they're used, the more strongly they're represented in that culture. So we often say that for a good listener, we only used to use half a word. Half a word is enough for you to understand me. So here you see how we have turned around the golden rule of communication and just shifted around the responsibility to the listener. So again, another lookout for you. Heads up. Your intelligence might also be measured by your willingness and your skill to infer what the other person is saying. Very complicated. It's not necessarily the most effective mode of communicating for most Brazilians. And it's more than anything, absolutely not, they're not aware of this pattern. So here again, I think caution is recommended. People will expect you to infer. Now, if you're not used to that, how do you do that? So we will look at this when we start talking about strategy. Okay, I promise you. So let's go over to what we call this informal hierarchy. So there is a hierarchy, but it is informal, because given that relationships are important, it's sometimes very misleading that you see people so close. There is a camaraderie. People are look like they're very close friends, etc. But actually, everyone knows who's the boss. And there is quite a big amount of concentration for decision making. You will find that people are a little bit shy to make decisions by themselves. So some of you that have said, well, I'm a little bit, I'm here with you today because my colleagues tend not to perform the full task. Maybe they have promised you something and then they don't deliver in time. It might be really, really important for you to find out who's the decision maker at the end. How do I do that? Well, I do that by posing questions. And they have to be around the bush questions in a way. So you can't possibly go to the person and say, listen, do you have the decision-making potential or you don't? People don't like to say they don't. And they don't. This is a little bit too straightforward. So what you will say is, oh, can you tell me a little bit about the decision-making process from now on? I don't want to push you. I don't want to follow up too soon. How much time do I need to give you? Can you tell me a little bit how this will go on now that you have my proposal? Giving you an example, right? So the person will then say, well, I really need to discuss that with my boss. And then you can say, oh, okay, that's great. Your boss involved, you know. Give it a positive view. And, oh, that's great. Does your boss have experience with that matter? And you go as long as you need to find out how long this boss has been in place, if this boss has, after all, the last say, or if this person who's talking to you is going to be important in the decision making. It takes time. I think what I'm trying to tell you is you need the patience to go over those conversations. So something that might take, let's say, 5 minutes in the U.S. will take 15 minutes here. Basically, I think ballpark, giving you a little bit of a realistic expectation on timing for your next endeavors in Brazil. So strategies for success, and I guess I started already. Here you go with the relationships. Face-to-face is preferred. English, when you say communication issues, I'm just guessing that part of it is just the language, really. Indirect communicators hate conference calls. And many of our Brazilians have Italian origin and also like to talk with their hands. So important it is that you make the person feel comfortable enough to reach out to you. There is a tendency here, and it can be seen as a positive thing, but of course it also has its shadow side. There is a tendency to try to solve problems by ourselves without telling you even that there is a problem, and hope that they will resolve themselves by letting time flow and circumstances change. More plan-oriented societies will sometimes really freak out under those circumstances and say, well, why? I wish you had told me before. I wish you had discussed that with me before. And I myself, which I would say maybe I'm a more internationalized Brazilian than average, I run into that very often with American partners, business partners, and I'm here sitting and trying to find the best solution without bothering you. And granted, very often the solution really is the right solution, but my business partner in the U.S. would have liked to be informed. Why don't I inform you? First, because, or like Brazilians tend not to, because we really believe we will find a solution. And sometimes we find that people are not very open to out-of-the-box solutions. So something that I will recommend to you is keep your mindset open to the out-of-the-box solution, because it might be the only productive and best one, really. So let me move forward. If possible, that's the second point on that list. If possible, give the big picture to the person, because this person understanding the big picture will be able to communicate back to you that given that situation, that circumstance, there is a new answer, a new strategy that you haven't even seen yet. Okay? Again, going back to the fact that you cannot change the person, you're the one finding the solution for your situation. This is why I'm asking you to take the initiative to keep an open mindset. The other thing down here, charisma matters. So, and especially for leaders. What's a good leader in Brazil? A charismatic one. So you might send down someone with excellent technical skills. Keep in mind this person might need a buddy, a charismatic buddy down here. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Okay. Some very practical hints, and I know that you will have access to this presentation. I don't want to go and list this, read it to you. Some of those strategies, anyways, are your common best practice strategies for communicating on email or phone. Maybe what I would like to tell you here is don't comment just on the weather when you call a Brazilian. That's the small talk that usually occurs, and we couldn't care less about the weather. We basically have 2 seasons. So the weather is not really something we talk about all the time. So you might want to be more effective if you go on the internet before you make a call, screen over the last few news about Brazil so that you can make an intelligent comment, a well-informed comment, last-minute comment, and maybe ask the person how is he or she impacted by that, other than making that very by-the-book small talk comment on the weather. It might go along a longer way, I would say. Here our view on some hints on dealing with hierarchy. I think I talked about that before, and the picture was chosen by purpose. You see that there is a structure, there is a pyramid, but people are moving, dancing a little bit around there, because people don't like to be stuck very much into a position. Again, for the ones that are looking at how to motivate, how to compensate, how to give merit, people love to go and kind of help and cooperate with the next table, next desk person. And by then, they have maybe delayed their own delivery. This is, again, not always the most productive way or more effective way to get the fastest way to get the result, but that's the way Brazilians motivate themselves. So if you take away 100% of that, you might not retain that person or have a not very happy camper working with you. The patient decisions can take a long time. We talk about that, and we talk why. Difficult decisions defer to senior people. Allow people to consult with superiors and colleagues. I gave you a little bit of an example of that. Don't put people on the spot. If you feel that they're being a bit resistant, or maybe they're going to give you just the answer that gets them off the hook and out of the uncomfortable position and get that phone call over with, and they say yes, 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 but that's not really the real yes, and this is a yes because you're putting them on the spot, okay? And proactively make suggestions Brazilians can commit to. So let's say, can you give me an answer maybe in 10 days? And you have to find out if those 10 days are feasible by asking about the big picture of the decision-making process. I talked about that before. Some further interesting, maybe motivating factors, again, linking to those people that are looking at compensation, merits, and motivation. Hierarchy matters. It doesn't look like hierarchy matters, but it does. So people do want to know who they're talking to in terms of hierarchy. Again, because they do know or are used to in Brazil that it's rather up the level, hierarchy level where decisions are made. You might be able to motivate people by letting them work on global projects, go and visit and see foreign processes, although it's becoming less expensive than it was 20 years ago to travel, it still is expensive. So if you provide a business trip to that person to go see an operation abroad, that always goes a long way. Going on international assignment is something Brazilians are more open today than they were in the past, and advance a career and learn a new language, that also counts a lot. So I think at this point, I went as broad and as deep as possible in the time we had, and I would love to hear your questions to this. Maybe you have remembered some practical situations that you would like to share. Usually we make a joke in Brazil, oh, this and that happened with my cousin. Can you explain me how he can solve that? So let's see what happened to your cousins. Joshua, would you like to tell me if people are courageous to to throw out some questions there?
Sure. We've actually had several. And just so you know, Vivian, we've had a couple people say, yeah, the speaker is spot on from an American's point of view. It's exactly their experience. So that's good to hear. Some people have asked
Sometimes I would
about,
like not to be spot on. Believe me, I would like, unfortunately, but let's deal with the reality. Okay.
Yeah, but there have been a lot of questions about how do you motivate, how do you deal with change? A couple questions about change and managing that, and how do you motivate people to achieve objectives?
Okay, difficult to generalize one question. I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to give myself a waiver here of not covering 100%, but giving you just a broad idea or some best practices that have worked. I talked a little bit, I gave you some ideas before that have worked. And I've heard many times that people perceive Brazilians as being very resistant to change. Maybe that has to do with the fact that this person might have found one particular way to deal with the day-to-day issues in a way that they think is very effective. And that in a way they have found a very personalized, individualistic solution that cuts through bureaucracy, that cuts through technology problems, that cuts through whatever problems we still face here. And this person will not want to let go of their personal solution, that very Brazilianized solution that they have found, to adopt maybe a more international, more pragmatic, more uniform solution that your organization might have implemented worldwide. You usually will find a big resistance. Anyway, you will find resistance because everywhere you have that non-inventive here syndrome. In Brazil, you have an even more non-inventive here syndrome. Here, I don't know exactly what you're talking about. I'm just maybe associating to implementing systems and things like that. I would guarantee that in the process, you make stops and look at how much of the tropicalization factor you allow this team to put in. Make sure that when you come in with change, you will have points in that new system, points in this new project where you sit down with the people and say, okay, let me listen to you. What were the difficulties? What are the local solutions that you had that are now not needed anymore? Which ones still are needed? And let them know that you will do that throughout the process to eliminate the big fear of being left without anything. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, maybe we can go to because that's also a motivational factor, okay, at the same time. Maybe we can go to the next question.
Sure. Yeah, I think you address a number of the issues in the next set of questions I've seen about how do you solicit feedback from, how do you make people part of the process, and by soliciting feedback and asking people for a specific, you're confirming understanding with your Brazilian colleagues, I think is kind of what you're getting at here, right? So there's been some other questions about the kind of fluid approach to projects. Some people saying that people will deliver once, but then not on a consistent basis. How do you manage sticking to project deadlines and and completing things on time and that sort of thing?
Excellent questions, all of them. Let me go first to the fluid project concept and the lack of consistency. Keep it fun. You guys usually, or many of you, I don't know where you're talking from, so I shouldn't generalize, but let's assume that you are coming from an Anglo-Saxon or Germanic system, usually you have that keep it simple point of view, or keep it simple way of doing things. Keep it fun here. The project is fun when it begins, and then this fun factor, and it might get boring. Nothing worse than a boring project. Keep it fun somehow. Keep it always like a new challenge. Keep the project, maybe you split it up in mini projects. Smell the flowers midway through, so that there was an exciting new mini project right after that first step. Long-term projects tend to demotivate Brazilians. There's no such thing as really thinking long-term. There's no such thing, and there was no time to explain where it comes from, but just the reason it was just not, there is no education as to thinking about long-term. It has to do with the weather, it has to do with the climate, it has to do with the fact that we don't have very precise four-season system, and so you're the one who has to keep putting in many goals for that project. And now making sure that the other party is understanding you might have to be one-on-one. Might have to be really outside of the conference call that has everyone on it. It might have to be on Skype, you know. This is an advantage. Take advantage of that. Brazilians love Facebook, and they're not shy of connecting on Facebook, even with business partners, business friends, and you know, Skype for sure. So take advantage of that and find other means of communication with those people. So again, plan more time for everything, because you might have to go back one-on-one to something that you were used to solve in a group setting. I hope that's helpful. Okay, how long do we have? Okay, we are a little bit over time already, aren't we?
Oh no, we still have a little bit of time left, Vivian.
Okay, good.
And there's one major other category of question I'd like you to respond to. So there've been a lot of questions about compensation and performance reviews. Specifically, you know, people talking about Brazilians having an aggressive approach to compensation, but some of the metrics not really adding up to other countries. So just reading verbatim from one of these, how do we distinguish the difference between an employee in Brazil just being Brazilian, as the speaker defines it, versus poor performance? We find the lack of, we find the lack of deliverables and slow pace to be very frustrating. Do we need more understanding of the style, or are they not good performers?
Oh God, don't understand me wrong. I'm the one person who's going to say it's not enough. Just being Brazilian is not an excuse, and it's not enough, and it's not the reason. And it's just not something you can work with. And it will take a little bit of time. That's the biggest problem that we are facing right now. Beside all the other problems we have, or challenges, let's call it challenges, be more positive, is the productivity factor. It wasn't taught to us. And I think just like maybe 50 years ago, your workforce in Brazil had to be prepared maybe on a second language or reading a manual, etc. At this point, I think you as an organization will have to give people maybe some sort of training or coaching on what it means to be productive, consistent, etc. Unfortunately, in the young people that come out of university, I see a lack of that when I observe, and so I'm generalizing, but it's such a problem that you can read it in the newspaper. It is the productivity problem you're going through is a major challenge, and it should not be an excuse. You will probably have to demonstrate between what's effective and what's just the difference between being efficient and effective, the difference between being having a nice working climate, but still having to perform and deliver, etc. And maybe go very deep and find out what's holding back that person. You might need to do a lot of hand-holding, a lot of project management. And this is one thing that maybe Brazilians will thank you for doing that for them. To have this person who collects all the information and who, schedules meetings every so often and gets things organized and going. Brazilians might be actually very thankful that you take on that role. Okay?
That's great, Vivian. That actually addresses a little bit of some of the other questions that came up. And I think you kind of addressed that by saying, Brazilians need this sort of scaffolding of, micro tasks and soliciting feedback from them, maybe having conversations offline, things like that, to allow them to achieve the levels of performance that you're looking for in a way that Americans might not, right? And there were some questions about Brazilians needing a lot of direction from the company or expecting the company to give them more, more support than other cultures. So I think you addressed that.
Well, yes. On one hand, microtasking, but I wouldn't call it microtasking because that's also a bit dangerous because you get the person used to that, and then you have to do it all the time. But and also maybe Brazilians will find that this is too much interference. I would say project managing from week to week, and once you find out that there is non-performance or non-delivery, you go back to that person and ask for one-on-one where you can be helpful, and if you need to repeat something, or if you have mistaken, you might have lost something, you might have missed something, and if you say that, shifting, let's say, the responsibility back to you, that you might not have understood something in a non-accusatory way, this person might then open up and say, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I thought you understood that I hadn't understood. Remember that communication style that is shifting shifting back to you the responsibility to find out if I am clear on that or not. So if you again, I can't say it enough, you possibly will have to go back and chat with that person and find out what's going on. What are the points that are still not completely clear? And what are the points that you might have to give them technical backup as well, that they might really not have the technical skills to move forward, but willing to learn. I would say Brazilians are willing to learn, but you might have to find the personal approach so that they trust you and are willing to learn from you and see the benefit of that. So one of the big benefits of that is that the person who learns to work internationally in one organization is able to take that on for their lives forever. I think that's something important to point out when you work internationally. And Brazilians might not see that yet.
That's great, Vivian. I think we're getting close to the hour time now, but it's been really, really helpful. Some of your insights here. I know I've actually learned a bit here too, and I really appreciate your time and your wisdom And I know that the attendees here have appreciated it as well. So thank you very much.
I'm thank you for you, and again, and I apologize for the generalization. I apologize for making it sound sometimes too easy. It isn't, and you are all in a position of maybe being able to request more help, and if there is more questions, actually, Josh, I would like to, through you, of course, offer an open ear, an open email, an open chat for whoever still has considerations or questions. Okay?
That's wonderful. If you go ahead and advance the slide, a few slides, Vivian, I'll pull up pull up some information about some of the resources that are available to you. So Cultural Training Passport is a site you should all check out. You can register with a short registration form. It gives you a demonstration access to show you what the tool is all about, and you can provide access for some information about Brazil or any of the countries your expats are in directly to your expats. We'll also be sending around after the webinar a pocket guide that is sort of bullet points and distilled information about how to be successful working with Brazilians. So that'll go to all of you, as well as the slides from this presentation. And if you advance the slide one more time, my contact information is also available to you here. Go one more slide ahead, Vivian.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's great. Perfect. So you can see my email address there, and again, this will be in the slides that you receive. If you have any questions at all for Vivian or for us, please feel free to contact me, and we'll be sure to address those for you. We hope you've had a good time on the session today, that you've learned a lot, and we appreciate the opportunity to share some insights on working effectively with Brazil. Thank you again, Vivian, and have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening wherever you are.
Yes, same to all of you, and thank you for being with us. Thank you, Josh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone.
Bye.